Welcome to the Politics of Everything. I'm Amber Daines, your host and podcast producer. This is a half hour of power, a podcast dropping every week where I unpack the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment, quality, and much, much more. Our guests are seasoned in the field or topic of their choice, even if you've not heard of them yet. This is a non-partisan show. So while I love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate of ideas, this is not a purely blue, white, green program. Please subscribe, tune in and enjoy the politics of everything. Do you ever think about your life's work, the sum of all parts, what you'll stand for once you retire or you'll finish your public life as such? Well, my guest today, Sarah Nelson, has joined us as a Chief Legacy Officer and advisor to leaders and teams offering individual and group sessions to create their own legacy statement, which is pretty powerful stuff. I've looked it up, and building a legacy means creating something enduring that can be passed on. And this might be a physical business or something that, you want to do in terms of a cause. A business legacy is not simply a thing, such as a startup or product, but the ability to endure through generations long after you are physically gone from this earth. Now, Sarah and I have had a few moments of intersecting work and life paths, and so it was probably high time that she came onto the politics of everything. Her associations with St. Catherine's, which is my alma mater, and in past episodes of this show, I've interviewed former employee there, Daisy Turnbull, who's also founder of Lifeline Bondi. And Sarah's work colleague, Carrie Kwan, who's co-founder of Mums & Co., has also been on this show, and now Sarah is my guest. So a little bit about Sarah. She's got a passion for Australian entrepreneurship and bringing community together. She's an active member of her local community through volunteering for Lifeline Australia, Centennial Parklands, and the local P&F. Sarah found legacy through senior roles across government, tertiary and private sector as a way to link brand to operations, reduce risk, scale impact. She's enjoyed 20 years in brand and project delivery, including retail, starting her career as a buying assistant with Polo Ralph Lauren, and moving into marketing communications via a short stint in PR with government for Department of Planning, and then came the $10 billion redevelopment of Barangaroo before picking up an operational role with the unprecedented collaboration between New South Wales University and TAFE New South Wales with the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. Now, more recently, she's begun her consulting work as Chief Legacy Officer, guided by her own legacy statement. And since 2020, she has been Chief of Staff with Mums & Co., an Australian community and digital platform supporting business owning mothers, and I'm a member as well. She's lived in lots of fascinating places, including Mumbai, London, Melbourne, New York, and now Sydney is her home. In her own words, Sarah says, "You are the boss of your life, however, you're not alone. A good leader communicates. See yourself as the CEO or Prime Minister of your life and constantly share your legacy with your teams and direct reports to bring about aspects of your life to alignment, focusing on priorities such as saving time," we all love that, and identifying gaps such as reducing risk. So today we're going to deep dive into the politics of legacy, and welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Amber. Lovely to be here.
Podcasting remotely can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be. Since 2017, I have relied on Zencastr's all-in-one web-based solution to make the process quick and painless, the way podcasting should be. If you know me, I'm pretty obsessed with quality guests, quality content, and quality sound, and that's what Zencastr allows me to do. Not to mention, it's really easy to use, even for my guests that aren't particularly tech-savvy. There's nothing to download. They just click on the link and we start recording. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and with everything from local recording to automatic post-production all in the one tool, you don't have to leave your browser to get each episode done. I want you to have the same great experience that I do for all my podcasts and content needs. So I have a special offer for you. If you go to zen.ai/politicsofeverything and enter this promo code, you'll get 30% off in your first 3 months when you sign up to Zencastr Pro. That's zen.ai, politics of everything. It's now time to share your story. So you've obviously had a really interesting career and lots of twists and turns like a lot of us have. Do you remember what you wanted to be as a kid, and did you get there?
I remember the feeling of really liking to do things the right way, but with a creative flair. And I loved that feeling of hosting people, of bringing people together all towards something important, whether it was my very important, 6th birthday party or a funeral even, but just those big group milestones and moments was that sense of, okay, this is really good work here. So there wasn't one idea, but beginning to think about my career, it was pretty clear that business could create those opportunities to do important work and creatively bring people together. My undergraduate was the double arts and media degree at Sydney Uni, and I majored in industrial relations. And then, as you've outlined in your bio, my first job was with Polo Ralph Lauren, which was just, first of all, the team were phenomenal, and many of us are still in touch. But it was just that link of leading with the brand, but the brand through every single aspect of the business, and just the power of how that brand brings so many people around the world together. So and then legacy is really continuing that power that I got that first glimpse of at Polo Ralph Lauren, and it's so nice bringing people together with all of the teams in their lives. So I think I got there.
Excellent. Well, it's just fascinating to dive into this idea of legacy. Tell us a little bit how you work with clients in your Chief Legacy Officer consulting role. What is that process like? Just kind of give us a sort of where we start and where we end and how we get there kind of summation, if you can.
Yeah, so it's a process, a series of checkpoints. I like to start with integrating and revisiting any coaching or personal growth work and professional, capabilities and skills work that you've done, because I find that starting with your strengths is a really good example where you can find pockets of green shoots or wins and runs on the board already, where you feel like you've already accomplished and you're already working towards something. And so I start with your character strengths. So they're just that superpower and those fundamental beliefs to guide you as we go throughout the process. And then it's taking that position and that framing that you are the CEO of your life. And so I rely on the design of an organizational structure, and I ask people to draw the teams around you in the way that the company has got finance and legal and HR and marketing and procurement. Who are the teams reporting to you? And I try to get those down to, somewhere between 3 and 6 teams that are your direct reports, so to speak. And then we pause on that. So we've got your strengths, we've got a bit of a mind map or an organizational chart of who reports into you. And then we go back. Then we go into how you were coded, what you've collected, and then what you'd like to craft. And your coding are those early experiences, often outside our control, really foundational stuff. So the era you were born into, the people around you, the rituals and the practices around major life milestones. And I ask you to reflect on them and to decide, as the way you are coded, is it something that you are going to continue in your life? Is it something that you're going to continue to use as a foundation to then base what the proactive legacy that we're now beginning to craft? So that's the coding phase. And then there's the collecting. So when, we're in our teens and our sort of formative early decades, we're a little bit more conscious and we're beginning to curate those next steps in life. So our experiences, where did you travel? Who were you in a relationship with? What kind of identity did you gravitate towards and start to flesh out? And our education, so what are the certifications, the qualifications, and the career decisions that you've collected, you've picked up, you've gathered along the way? And just those other formative participation and interactions that have really, upon that hard coding that you can't really control, what have you gathered? And then upon these experiences and that reflection on those probably first 2 or 3 decades of your life, you're at that point of making a decision on what you'd proactively like to craft. And so and this is kind of the very iterative, organic part of the process. It's really storytelling and weaving all the different elements and then thinking about what do you wish for? What's that vision that you would like to have and you would like to lead? And then align with that vision, going back to your strengths. What do you already know to be true? And then from that, there's this sort of bubbling sense in your stomach. And hopefully a phrase or a word or a statement, a feeling will begin to come to mind. It will begin to become apparent. And I call that your legacy statement. And that's when you visualize everything in alignment. And it's that, you might like to call it a mantra, you might like to call it your legacy statement, that purpose statement. It's just that sense of, now you've got this line to guide you as a decision-making framework.
What a process. I mean, does this take months, weeks, years? How long does it take? Or it's not about the time, it's just about the process?
It typically, you get a sense of it quite quickly, because it's a really, really deep and thorough and intimate process, but very guided. And so sort of like 20 minutes each. Your strengths, if you haven't done them before, you can do an online quiz and you can get them in about 15 minutes. Coding and collecting, I allow about 20 minutes each. And then it's a 20-minute or so conversation. So you can absolutely get there over a lunch. And then it's really about sitting with it and feeling, does that work? And a good way to test it is, how do I spend my money? How do I spend my time? What are the contents of my fridge? And if you're asking yourself this question of, is that my legacy? Like, oh, there's a few words that stick out, or maybe that felt like I was overreaching, or it wasn't really authentic. And so that, totally allow it to iterate and be organic over time, but you can definitely get a really solid first pass in an hour or so.
Wow, that's incredible. I love this idea that you espouse, which is that legacy starts now. And I think traditionally many of us have seen it as almost the later life focus, perhaps once you're retiring, once you're wrapping up, I guess, some of your public life activities, a life stage thing perhaps where your family have all grown up and you are really able to think about how you're going to spend the last third of your life, for example. Give us some examples of why you think legacy starts now and why it's important to sort of harness that earlier than perhaps we traditionally have thought about it.
There are 4 points to the why legacy starts now. The first one is, it's the first yoga sutra. So it's a philosophical starting point, and it's, mindfulness and being present. Like, if not now, then when? And practically, the example is, I've seen in teams that I've worked with as a marketer, I've been in situations where another team in the same company had vastly different priorities and a very different narrative and way that they were going to the market or going to stakeholders. And it created a problem, having that disconnect and that incongruence between one team and another in the same company created this massive risk, which inevitably was left to the branding and the marketing team to fix. And you can't just, slap a logo or slap some kind of like PR campaign to fix it. It needs the best companies, the best leadership is that phenomenally integrated and consistent style. And I think the rise of cancel culture that we're seeing now is symptomatic that for so long leadership and operations was pretty scattergun and there wasn't that cohesive narrative. So we've seen examples in the corporate world and of what happens if legacy isn't now and if legacy isn't everything. And also that, that sense of, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So how can you like weave in that consistent story, weave in those relationships across everything that you do? Because 2 other reasons, it's amazing for our brains to celebrate wins, no matter how small, because it neurologically rewires our brain to recognize more success. So if you're constantly telling yourself your legacy, and if you're constantly sharing your legacy with others and using it as a unifying element for you all to achieve, work towards and achieve, then that's going to help you recognize and invest in more returns for that legacy. Not to mention, it's kind of like superannuation that, yes, you can hope to be incredibly wealthy and pay for your retirement by a windfall at age 59, but it's much easier to start small and rely on the beauty of compound interest along the way. So legacy is absolutely now for that philosophy. It's mindfulness, but also for that communication to build your relationships and invest and enjoy the returns along the way.
Absolutely. Your own legacy statement is, and I quote, rebranding Australia through the divine feminine. Obviously, you do that in everything you do. You working at Mums and Co, for example, volunteering with Lifeline to support mental health, and even your kind of personal time. You talk about having time in nature, trusting your intuition, and then how you nurture your family and friendships is all that connection to that divine feminine, which you mentioned. Do you think your legacy statement may evolve over time because you've obviously got a long life hopefully ahead of you? And do you see that in others where it can sort of ebb and weave and change as their life does?
I see particular words in a legacy statement mean different things at different times. So, a very personal example is that my legacy statement is rebranding Australia through the divine feminine, as you said. And sometimes saying the divine feminine, I'm like, what's that? And it just landed. It just came. And sometimes I feel a little bit nervous about it because it's a bit woo-woo. But then other times, like when I reflect on, I saw this morning that we've got the first all-female space station. Like we're just living at this phenomenal time for women, and that sense of trusting the process, and it's there for a reason. So my relationship with different words in my legacy statement changes according to lots of different things, and I see that in my clients. And so I was with one recently, and she's got a phenomenal statement, but there's one word in particular which is very, very, very strong at the moment. So I love having the whole statement, but I also allow that flexibility to find the nuances and new interpretations in every single individual word of that statement. But I think it's a really good challenge to have. Is the statement that comes up for you, is that something that you would feel comfortable with in 5 minutes or 50 years? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably onto a pretty good thing.
Absolutely. I think that's a great summation of what's a very complicated idea for a lot of people who may not be familiar with it. So philanthropy and giving or volunteering is often a main pillar or, part of people's legacy that they want to create and shape. In my experience, having worked, I've got a master's in philanthropy, and I saw a lot of models of that over the years I've worked with different organisations. Do you think that's an important part of someone's legacy? Does it always have to have that element to it, or can it just be a lot more sort of work orientated or career orientated, or business, if you like? What's your view on that?
My view is that your legacy is how you spend, or how you would like to spend, your resources. So your effort, your money, and your time. And I advocate that we need to be really conscious with how we spend our resources. And philanthropy or community volunteering or giving, or in that the broadest church of it all, however you would like to spend and however best you can spend your time in alignment with the legacy that you would like to live with and lead with, that is my recommendation for how you should consider it. I don't think having a legacy means that you need to start thinking about donating. It's just that investigation of what makes you feel really good and what delivers you impact. And if that's giving, which is a pretty fabulous way to drive happiness, and I personally think that Australia needs to develop that culture a little bit more, I would always recommend philanthropy and volunteering and giving. But it's for the individual, it's that once you've got your legacy statement, then you can use it to audit and do like a gap analysis of where is your legacy not in your life, and it might be giving and volunteering.
And for some people, it could be about time. If they're at a certain point in their life, they might have aging parents, young children, full-on career. There could be other, or health reasons even. Like, I imagine there's time for people to fill in those gaps. It doesn't have to be everything all at once.
Exactly. And it's really, legacy helps you. It's that decision-making framework. So it doesn't, and that's why legacy isn't philanthropy, and philanthropy doesn't necessarily build the legacy that you're after anyway. So you have to be careful of giving for giving's sake, and you have to give with a clear purpose. Otherwise, it will just drain your resources. And so using legacy to guide where and how and when, as you have just outlined, give, where and how and when you can give and to get involved, but also where to step back. So, I've used it directly. There's lots of phenomenal causes, and I'm quite clear and conscientious in, well, that's a line, and that's not my priority right now. But the more that you're thinking about philanthropy and giving and volunteering, the more we're developing that capability and culture as Australia, which again I think is really important for us to continue to do.
Are there one or two examples of legacy leaders that you think are worth celebrating or acknowledging, and why? And they don't even have to be famous. They could be people you know in your community, just to sort of share with us from a practical point of view some differences in what legacy can actually look like.
Yeah, I've got two. I've got one very, very famous, and then 345,000 very, very fabulous. So the famous, I couldn't go past Beyonce, because the way she interprets the platform that she has worked so hard to create and signals her legacy in every single deal, in every single music video, in every single performance. Beyonce is not waiting to showcase Black excellence. She is absolutely leading with her legacy in everything that she does. And I love that. So, Bayhive. And then day to day, you're a member of Mums & Co, and I have the enormous privilege of seeing Australia's 345,000. Women are creating more businesses than men. There's 345,000 business-owning mothers in Australia. And I know, because I'm one as well. And the legacy of role modeling entrepreneurship and backing yourself and exploring new things and bringing people together in business and, your marketing. Or I was reflecting on how many women in our community have launched their books this year. It's just incredible. And it's that kind of, they're not waiting. Their legacy is absolutely now. And they haven't, I really take issue with the advice, you can have it all, but not all at once, because Mums & Co, like so many, Mums & Co members, like so many women, like Beyonce across the world, have it all at once. And so I love how legacy can be that prioritization framework to find more time, to reduce the risk, because it's all, and it's all at once. So yeah, Beyonce and business owning mothers.
Excellent. I love it. And maybe they all combine as well. Beyonce should become a Mums & Co member. Come on.
I'll
put the shout out. I'll put it out there to the universe, and I'll just tag her and see what happens in this episode. Just changing tack a little bit, what's the best advice that you've ever been given, and why? And it doesn't even have to be about legacy. It could be about anything, really.
The best advice I've been given and why was pre-legacy. It was when I was working at the Barangaroo Delivery Authority by a wonderful mentor of mine, Biliana Smith. And Biliana taught me that you define your own success. And thinking about that now is definitely a precursor to this legacy process and legacy framework. But I was a young mom returning to the workforce, and there was it was a big project. And that advice, you define your own success, gave me that invitation to think about what I wanted, rather than just being at work and being a lot more conscious and aware and involved.
Yes.
In creating that success, but then also that permission that I'm the boss. I definitely wasn't, running everything, but of my own life, I define my own success. So for the invitation and for the permission that piece of advice gave me, it's something that I reflect on very regularly and would pass on to everyone listening.
If we spoke again in a year, what would be your number one goal to have achieved, and why that goal?
I wrote down to have hosted more parties.
Is this a post-lockdown catch-up? What's happening here?
I think so. But when you ask that question of, your opening question of what did you want to do when when you were young? What did you want to be when you grew up? And it's just that feeling, that feeling of bringing people together. And the other thing I really enjoyed was the reflection on, the question of, do you think your legacy statement will stay the same, and how different words can mean different things at different times. And so the other thing, I hope in 12 months' time, I'm curious to lean into that divine feminine side of my legacy. And it's interesting seeing it, I heard it as a spiritual coming out. I heard that described on Instagram recently. And yeah, so in 12 months' time, lots more parties, and that confidence and that sense of really leaning into the divine feminine phrasing of my own legacy statement.
As we wrap up our conversation today, what would be your final takeaway message on the politics of legacy?
Your legacy is right now, and you don't need to have a big job to have a legacy. Our legacy is how we use our resources of time and money, and that's how we lead.
Yeah, I love that. Well, if you do want to connect further with Sarah, of course, there'll be some details on our show notes. It's been a very deep philosophical conversation, which I love, and hopefully our audience has too. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, I thrive on your feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network through Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects. I'm always on the hunt for new and diverse guests, so if you or someone you know has a fresh idea you're busting to get out there, please email me at amber@amberdanes.com, and my crew will get back to you very soon.